Thanks for the introduction. Our webinar today will be based around structural detailing with advanced steel. The webinar coordinator introduced you to a theory called consumption gap. The book Complexity Avalanche, shown here, defines the consumption gap as the difference between the potential value a product could provide to an end user compared to the value it is actually providing today. In the book, J.B. Wood identifies the curve shown here as the addition of features and complexity seen in technology products in the last several years. This technology not only relates to our topic of engineering software that we will be discussing here today, but also industries such as cell phones, automobiles, and even televisions. The lower curve shown here shows the trend of end users to consume the features being offered without assistance. This is where D3 can help to maximize the value you're receiving from the software you currently own today. So D3's goal today is to help minimize this consumption gap by showing a few workflows and tools that we believe are currently being underutilized or not being used at all. The topics we're going to be discussing today with regards to advanced steel are laying out our structure with building grids, creating a multi-level structure, using the connection vault to add in bolted connections, and saving time with advanced copy. So let's get started. My first step in getting this structure started will be to lay out a building grid. What I'm going to do with this building grid is basically set some parameters, the length and width of the grid, how many axes I want along the grid, and this is going to set up a bunch of points that I can use to place my members in this structure. This is one of the tools that kind of helps me get around some of the conventional modeling stuff. I can just lay out the perimeter of my structure and pretty much pick and place where I want structural members to be. So the grid command is up here in my ribbon, very top left in the Objects tab. I'll go ahead and click on Building Grid. First thing it wants me to pick two different points, diagonal points, to set up the grid rectangle, essentially. So I'll start off at the origin point, 0, 0, and I'm going to make this building, let's say, 80 or 40 feet wide, 60 feet long, why not? Actually, let me step that back, put that in wrong, 0, 0. Let's see, 40 feet and 60 feet. Alright, so I've got a grid laid out here, and the grid, you can see it's got axes parallel, perpendicular to each other. If I go into the grid by double clicking on either one of the axes, right here I've got my parallel axes, I can come in here and edit some parameters of the grid. And this is how you edit most things in advanced steel. You go into, if it's a beam, you can double click on the beam and you can edit all the properties of the beam, help to cut it, set the beam size, the member size, and everything like that. But what I want to do here, I should go down to group. Here in this tab, I can specify the number of axes I want along this grid. See, if I hit 3, enter, it spaces them out, it changes them. You notice it automatically updates the distance to split them evenly. Put it back to 4. That's the amount I think I want here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the grid like that. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing too complicated there. So I've got my grid laid down, and now the first thing I want to do, I'm going to add some columns and some eaves to go across and connect to each other. So I'm going to go over to the Extended Modeling tab. Right here, this first option, Portal Gable Frame. With this tool, I can quickly add a frame in to frame my building, maybe on each end. Instead of adding separate columns and eaves and tying them together, I can just use this. So first thing I do is click the point that I want my first beam at. So that's where I want my first column. Here's where I want my second column. And it asks you to put the point for the apex or the height. I just click somewhere in space because that brings up this menu here, which I can use to control my portal frame. So I could switch here and type between Gable frame or portal frame. Gable frame includes some extra columns in between that I can manage here in the Gable sections and Gable distances. Just set different dimensions for how far apart they're spaced and what size these members are. They've 6 by 12 W sections or whatever I want. But I'm going to leave it as a portal frame. I just want those two columns at the end. And I'm going to go down here to set out. On the set out, I can edit some values like the width of the frame or the span of the frame, the total height, how high up the eaves go, slope of the roof. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put 30 feet in for the height. I want this to be about a 30-foot tall building. And you can see this, but quite an angle here to the eaves. So I need to bring my eaves up. We've got our eaves level right here. So I'll go maybe at 25 feet. and that gives us like a 14-degree roof slope. I'm okay with that. That's good enough for me, so I'll go ahead and leave that. Exit out there, and now I've got a couple of columns and some eaves setting up a frame at one end of my structure. Now, I want this frame also at the other end of the structure, but first I want to set up some connections to connect these members together. I'm going to change my view type here, realistic here, put some color in between these wireframe lines. As you can see, I don't have a proper connection here. It's just cutting right through that eave into that column. So what I can do, I can quickly and easily add connections between these beams with the connection vault over here in my tool palette. So I'm going to hit the plus sign here, drop this down. There's a long list of connections that we can use here, and they give pretty good descriptions of what each one means over here as you hover over them. The one I want, I'll just go with the neoframe bolted with the haunch here. Click on that. The first thing it wants me to do is identify a column. So say this is my column, then I right click. This is my rafter, right click again. And it'll trim up my part, and it'll go ahead and add relevant members in here, like plates, bolts, all the hardware. Got stiffener down here. So I can come over here to my little dialog box here, and there's a bunch of options that I can change to edit this. Add in stiffeners and things like that. See cap plate right here. There's already a cap plate on there, but if I didn't want one, I could turn it off. You could see that removed right there. I'll leave a full cap plate on. See, we can control column extension, all sorts of options here. What I want to do, let's go to stiffeners. I want to add in, let's see, more stiffener in here. You can see it automatically adds these extra members in here. There's a bunch of controls that we can use. We're just going to keep this pretty standard for the purpose of this exercise, but there's a bunch of ways to modify these members within the connection vault tools. And they're really easy to use, and you get around doing this more conventional modeling, which might be a little more difficult. So before I move on, though, I'm going to want to use this member, or this actual connection on my other side, an identical one. So if I've got connections that I'm going to reuse a lot, I can come in here to Library, and I can save the values of this connection to be reused later. So I save those values, and you see right here, it's got all the different values. It's pretty much identical to one I did before, but now if I want to add a comment here just to kind of let people know, or let myself know in the future what this was, I hit edit right here. I can fill out this field, so I'll say for presentation, if I could spell right, for presentation. There we go. Hit OK. So now I've got all the settings that went into this connection here saved in this library. So I hit X, close out of that command. I'm going to hop over to the other end. As you can see, I've got no connection there. I'll start up the command again, pick my column, hit right click, pick my eave, right click, add it in a connection. I'm going to go down here to library, for presentation, and you can see it brought all of those same members right in there with all the same settings as the other one. So hit X, and I'm done with that. And now I'm going to add in a connection between these two eaves here. So I can see over here this icon looks like it would be good for some end-to-end beam connection. So I'll click that, and apex haunch, that looks perfect. I'll click that one. It wants me to click the main beam. Either one doesn't matter. I'll click this one, right click, secondary beam. That one, right click. There's my apex haunch. Again, with this one, there's a lot of controls you can use to edit each member, plate thicknesses, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to leave this standard and proceed on to the next step. All right, there's one more thing I want to do before I pattern out these frames. I'm going to add a base plate and some footings down here to the bottom. So for a base plate, I can grab that from my connection vault. Base plate right here. All I need to do is click a column, right click. It throws a base plate down there. Just like all the other connections, there's a bunch of options over here in the dialog box to edit it. I'm just going to leave everything default. Close out of that and add a base plate to the opposite side. Base plate, column. There we go. Good to go on that. And now I want to add in a footing, concrete footing to the bottom here. So I'm going to go back to the Objects tab, and my footings are isolated footing right there. For the position of the footing, I'll just get the bottom of the beam, and it'll put that below my base plate. And I'll do another one. Whoops. Isolated footing. Come over here, underneath the base plate. Good to go. So now I've got my footings, my base plates, I've got connections between all my beams and everything. It looks like I'm ready to pattern out my frame. So what I'm going to do is use the Advanced Copy tool here in my tool palette under Tools to pattern these all out. But with this pattern, it's also going to bring all the other connections, and all I'll have to do is select the columns, the eaves, and the footings, and it'll bring along the base plates and the connections at the end of the eaves, between the columns and the eaves, and everything along with it. So I'll hit the Advanced Copy button, select Objects, and I'll just select all these. Boom, boom, eave, eave, column, and my other footing. Right click, and then down here I need to specify my distance, which I could put in just a value, travel along the y-axis, X amount of feet or whatever. But I can also click this button, come out here and measure a value. So I'll just click first point on the grid to this point on the grid. I want to copy them out that far. See, number of copies, I want to make 3 more. That looks right. So include additional connections, I want to make sure that's checked, and it is. I'll hit preview, and that looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and hit OK there. So now I've got all that copied. I want to go ahead and add some bracing over here between these beams. And one thing I need to do is, before I start adding the bracing, I need to make note of my UCS here. It might be a little hard to see, but the bracing will be drawn basically, if you imagine the x-axis and the y-axis being perpendicular, there's a plane in between those two. The bracing is going to be drawn in on those on that imaginary plane. So what I need to do to ensure that I can just click and pick and place these braces in is I need to rotate my UCS around to where my y, maybe my y is facing up and my x-axis will be facing down this way along this path. So I'm going to go over here to my UCS options, and let's see, I can rotate around the x once, that puts my y-axis up, rotate around the y-axis once, and that puts my x over here. So I should be good there. Now I'm going to go, actually I need to go to my bracing command, which is here on extended modeling, bracing right here. I just pick my first point, and I'm going to do a snap override. I just want nodes. That node there, maybe 2 feet off the bottom. Oops, I've missed it. Actually, maybe I don't want nodes. Start that command again. Yeah, 2 feet off the bottom. And come back over here. Start at the top, but go maybe 6 feet down. So I want to clear all my Morse stiffener stuff. Let's see where that fell. Yep, it fell down below that. Maybe I want to put it up a little higher. Let me get rid of those connections. Actually, I'll just click Windows, select those, and delete them. Try that again. 6 feet was a little low. I often just delete these things. Whoops. And place them in again. Bring that up 2 feet. I like 2 feet from the bottom, but maybe 5 feet from the top. Let's see how that works. Zoom in here. 5 feet down. Yeah, that's a little closer. I'm fine with that. So down here I could adjust the different types of sections, different members. I'll just leave them as angles. That's fine for now. So now I want to add connections between my ankle bracing and my columns. So I'll go back to my connection vault, and I'm going to find my angle bracing connections here, and I'm going to do the gusset plate at one diagonal here. Do this command. First thing I do is pick my column, then I right click, pick my diagonal brace, and I can zoom in on that, make sure it added it in. That looks good. And again, there's a bunch of options to edit the bracing, edit the plate, make it look different, bolts and all that stuff. I'm just going to leave it as default, and I'm going to copy these out to the other beams, or I'm sorry, these other braces. What I'm going to do for that, instead of just recreating them with the connection vault, I'm going to go into my tool palette and I'm going to use create from template. Or create by template. What create by template does is allow me to pick a component out of a connection, like this plate, for example. Now I right click and it lets me recreate. Basically takes me into the exact command I would need to recreate that exact connection. So I click the column, right click, click the brace, right click, and there we go. It added that connection on this side. So now I've got two over here on the opposite side I'll need to add in. So what I'm going to do for that, I'll use create by template multiple. With multiple, I can pick that column and then each brace that's going to attach to it, and it'll create them both at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead, I need to select this to start my template, and the beams that correspond to the joint will be there, and then I'll click my two braces, right click, and it added in my connection here, and it added in my connection here. So that looks good. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and do advanced copy and pattern this bracing down the line. So advanced copy, select objects, bracing there. My distance, I know 20 is a good distance. I want 2 for my copies. Whoops, I skipped out of my command. Try that again. Select objects, brace, brace, and see, I want to go along the X, along the Y, 0. Oops, keep doing that. Alright, again. Click, click, and I'll use this to measure from there to there along the X. 2 copies should be good. Hit preview. It looks good, and it copied my connections. Happy with that, so I'll hit OK. So I've got my bracing on half the side. Now what I'm going to do, oops, I accidentally mirrored something up here. That's no big deal. I'll just delete those. And it skipped out in the connection, so that's good. Okay, so I've got my bracing over there. I'm doing half of that, and then I'm going to mirror it over. But also I want to add some purlins, some beams that run across my structure on top of the eaves. That if I were to put a roof on, the purlins would the roof would sit on top of the purlins. So my purlins command is up here, extended modeling, purlins. All I need to do for purlins is just click the beams that they're going to lay across. Right click. I'll say no reference point, no additional beams, and it laid out my purlins. And I can adjust the spacing. I'm just going to leave it as default. I'm not too worried about it. But I do want to change the member type. I like C channels for this. So I'm going to go down to sections, right here. Whoops, ANSI C channels. Maybe make it a bigger one than a C3. Drop this down, maybe a C6. Yeah, 6-inch channel. I'm good with that. I've got my purlins in there. And I'll go ahead and add a connection for my purlins. So connection vault here, my purlin connections right there. So first my main beam, the eave. Second my purlin, right click. And it added in a little connection there, a little bent plate with bolts. But I don't want it on this side. I want my purlin connection on the other side. And also I noticed that the offset isn't quite what I want here. So what I'm going to do for that, I'm going to jump back to my purlin and extend it out a little bit. So I double clicked on this item box, or this joint box out here that just encompasses the entire selection for my purlins. And I'm going to go down here to alignment and overhang first support, I'll say 6 inches. And I'll do the same thing on the opposite end. That way I know that my connection will catch on that purlin. And I'm going to go back in and edit my connection to go on the back side of the purlin. So connection or distances, purlin shoe position, other side. You can see that flipped. And I'll use my create from template multiple again to pattern that out. So I select part of my purlin connection. Then the first thing is the beam that it's going to connect to. Right click. Then I select all my purlins that need to be connected. So 1, 2, remember this one, 3 purlins, right click, there's my connections. Alright, so now you see it splits the purlins automatically at each eave, so I'm going to add in a connection for these double purlins. Let's see, 2 purlins with bolts. I think that'll work out alright. Select my main beam, select purlin 1, right click, purlin 2, right click, and add it in my purlin connection. Again, I'm going to flip the side, purlin 2 position, one side, and I'll use my create by template multiple again. From there, got that main beam, oops, skipped a step on that. Should be able to select my purlin, keep clicking off in space, purlin connection there, right click, main beam, right click, purlin 1, right click, purlin 2, right click. I'll try it again, click, main beam, right click, purlin 1, right click, purlin 2, right click, and one more time, main beam, right click, purlin 1, purlin 2, there we go. And I'll go ahead and skip one of those beams just for the sake of time, but I'll go ahead and add a purlin connection on the opposite end. Purlin connection, main beam, purlin, flip the side, and I'll copy it out again. Right click, main beam, here's all my purlins, right click, there we go. So now I've got all my purlins connected. I'm happy with that. All I need to do is mirror all this over to the other side. So to mirror my purlins and my bracing, I'm going to do the advanced copy command. Go in and select objects. I'm just going to make sure I pick every brace and every purlin beam. Do some window selects to make it a little quicker. I try to avoid not clicking stuff I don't want to mirror. There we go. And I'll right click when I'm done picking my objects, come down here, click mirror, select my mirror point. I'll use a midpoint just in the middle of the grid, and then I'll hit preview. Looks like I've got my bracing over there. Looks like I've got purlins with connections. I'm okay with that. Looks good. Alright, next I'm going to come around here to the back of the structure and create myself a little mezzanine about 15 feet above the base here. So first thing I want to do is go to the Home tab, open up my Project Explorer, and here where it says Model Views, I'm going to right click, click Create Level Above, and this is going to allow me to create another level above 15 feet above the base. And that's going to cut me down to straight to that level. That way I don't have any of that other stuff up in between. And I'm going to, let's see, I'll go ahead and create myself a building grid just to help lay this stuff out, because I am going to 40 feet by 20 feet. I am going to add some columns and beams in here. So there's my building grid. Now I want to add some beams, which will be around the perimeter of the mezzanine. So I'm going to go to the Objects tab and do a continuous beam. And here I can just click along this path. I'll just start here, go all the way around, and as it's putting everything up at the level I just created, not down at the floor. I'm just clicking on the grid to help me lay it out. When I'm done with that, I'll right click, and I'm happy with the size of the beam, so I'll just finish that. And then I'll move on to my columns. I'm going to add a couple of columns here in the corner. One there, right click, and I want the positioning to be centered. Looks like it is, so I'm happy with that. Close that out, but I just noticed these beams, I want these beams lower. I don't want them going up above that level at all. I'm going to double click on those, change their positioning. Here real quick, and one more. Alright, I've got those moved down the way I want them, and now I'm going to go to the connection vault and just quickly, for the sake of adding in connections, I'm going to add in some end plates. Not worried too much about the actual dimensions of them, but just to put something in here real quick, add some end plates that connect these beams and the columns. Finish that. That's fine. And now I will use the Create from Template tool. Select that. Like there. The beam. Whoops. I don't want that beam. I want this one. Got one there. Skipping a step. First thing I do is select my connection I want to copy. Then my main beam, and then the beam I'm cutting. And I'll just keep going around here. Put in all my other ones. Alright, there's all of my connections, so I'm good to go there. Now, see, the next thing I want to do, I periodically reset my UCS to match the world every once in a while, just to make sure. Sometimes you have to move the UCS around when modeling in advanced steel. So now I'm going to add in some flooring down here, some floor beams, some inset beams. So I'll start the mezzanine floor command, and I need to pick diagonal corners, so from here to here. And I'm going to zoom out and see what it looks like. It looks like it laid them in there nicely. Only one thing is they're coming out a little bit too far. This pattern's going out a little far. So I'm going to go here to parameters and maybe increase my start gap and my end gap. Now the first beam will come out 6 inches. That still might be a little close to the end there. I'll make it 10 by 10. Why not? So now the start gap on either end is 10 inches. I'm happy with my beams there. Now I'm going to add some cleats to these beams. So I'll pick the beam I'm going to connect to, my floor beam, add it in a cleat. I'm fine with the defaults there. And now I'm going to use the Create by Template multiple command. Select my cleat, right click, select my long beam, right click. Then I'm going to look at the top down, do a window select of all my other beams, and right click. And it should add in some cleats at the end of each of these beams. And it did. So I'll do the command again to get them on the other side. Whoops. Got the beam. I want the connection. There we go. Click that. Here's my main beam. And here's all the rest of my beams. Let that load for a second. Alright, so I've got my flooring all placed in there. Now I think I'm ready to work on my handrail, and then I'll move on to my stairs. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and throw my handrails up around the perimeter of my mezzanine here, and I'm also going to add in some stairs with some handrails on this side too. So I guess I'll do the stairs first. I'm going to go to the Extended Modeling tab, hit the Stairs command, enter, and pick my first point for the stairs. Second point up here. Hit enter. It's just a line that I drew in. And I'm not going to change much here. One thing I will change is the landing up at the top. Oops, landings. I want my top landing to come out about 2 feet. That should hit just about on that beam. And And now I'll go ahead and add some handrails to my stairs. So when I do my handrails, I start the handrail command. I pick all the objects that my handrails are going to connect to. So I'll pick all the little beams that are associated with these stairs. Right click, start point of my railing, and then down here. End point, let's take it up here. No. Don't want a reference point. And you zoom out here. You can see my handrails are getting cut off by the level up top. I'm going to real quick add in a welded post connection just to make sure it creates copes at the end of those pipes. Then I'm going to turn off my level 2. I should be able to see all the way up to the top of my railing. And that looks good to me. So now I want to go ahead and mirror my handrails to the other side of the stairs. So that's a stair box. Let me see here. There's my railing. Okay. So I'm going to select that. Start the advanced copy command. I will do a mirror. And my stairs are just right in the midpoint, right in the middle of this grid. So I can use that as my midpoint. Just make sure my midpoint snap is on. Get to the midpoint here. Make sure turn ortho on. Preview that. And you can see I have got rails on the other side. Now I'm going to hit OK on that. So handrails on my stairs look alright. Now I'm going to go ahead and add handrails up around the perimeter of this mezzanine so people don't fall off of that. So I'll just select all the objects that my handrails are going to sit on, all these beams. Enter that. And I need to select the start point of my railing, which will pick right there. And the end point, make them come around here. No. Actually, I think I might have missed something on my snap there for that railing. Let me back that up. Try that again. Railing on these 3 beams. Start point can be right here. And my end point, bring it around here. Goes to there. Nope. There we go, that looks better. Zoom out, you can see I've got railing around the perimeter of my mezzanine. So now I'll go to post connection. Let me just minimize that real quick. And I'll make these welded connections as well. Alright, so I'll say for the purpose of this building, I do intend on putting a wall here, so I'm going to leave the handrails up here, and the stairs will just lead up and out to the mezzanine. So I think that's about it for my structural modeling. Alright, the last thing I'm going to do here with this model is I'm going to have Advanced Steel number all my parts, and then after that I'm going to use it to have it automatically generate a detailed drawing of one of my parts. I could make it go for all the parts, but due to time constraints it takes a while to load, so I'll just go with one just to show what that looks like. So first thing I want to do is go to the Output tab, go to Numbering, pick a number method. I'll just have a number by single parts instead of assemblies. Hit OK and let that generate. Once that's done, I get my part numbering chart. Again, this is all just named by whatever the defaults are for these parts. You can edit that in the templates. You can do a lot of editing with your part numbering. After I've got that, I'm going to go over here to Drawing Styles. Go to Single Part, and I'll just do a single part to view of a beam. And I'll pick out this beam. Right click, it shows it's saving it to a file, 1003, Okay. So now that I've got that, I'm going to hop up into my document manager, go to my details, up to date, you see 1003, hit open drawing. Usually it takes a second to think. There we go. And as you can see, it's laid it out here. You can edit the way the dimensions space, the way the views space from each other. All of this is just running off default, but you can see it's ordinate dimensioning for these whole dimensions. It's got dimensions in between, it's got dimensions from this end. It's dimension them all out pretty well. Like I said, you can edit this, but this is just a little glimpse at how quickly you can add in detailed drawings with Advanced Steel. It does a lot of the work for you once you've got it all set up.